With us today's topic is dedicated. The theme is the deity's history. So we're going to start now. I'd like to invite a few devotees to come, please. Dhananjaya, please come up and take a seat. Also, we'd like to invite Mother Mandikini to also please come and have a seat, and Mother Arundhati. Arundhati, and also Sakshi Gopal Prabhu. Okay, he's here. There he is. Sakshi Gopal Prabhu, please. You could get another chair. Also, Rancho Prabhu can also come and join the panel. Prabhu is, apart from being a personality who took up a lot of the service and responsibility here after the original devotees came. He's still continuing now to take so much responsibility within ISKCON on behalf of Srila Prabhupada. He's actually at present serving as temple president at Amsterdam Temple, which is...
You're all invited to come. Anytime you feel like a break from London, and you want to go to a very nice pollution-free city, with very few cars and lots of canals, and lots of very old buildings. And please, you're most welcome.
Yeah.
Come and visit us. We call it Amsterdam.
Oh.
Because Srila Prabhupada visited, actually, he visited twice. The first time was in 1969, and the second time was in 1972. And just like this evening's theme is deity worship, how the deities came to London. Actually, the very first deities that came were Jagannath, Subhadra, Baladev. They were deities in waiting, because they actually came over with the original American devotees. And they also waited very patiently until they got the opportunity to show their faces. And it was a very unique experience because, of course, our very place temple was very narrow, much narrower than this temple. And in fact, Lord Jagannath, Subhadra, Baladev, they occupied a shelf above Sri Sri Radha Londonishvara, because they couldn't stand next to the main altar. So that arrangement was done by Shyam Sundar under the instruction of Srila Prabhupada. And I was very fortunate because when I was 9 years old, living in Scotland, I had this premonition, and I was told by this disembodied voice that I'd have a tremendous religious experience at the age of 21. So I had 12 years advance notice of quite an astounding event that took place in my life. And of course, off and on I'd remember and forget. And of course I never discussed this particular experience, extraordinary experience, with my friends or with my parents or with my brothers and sister. Because I'd heard that people, crazy people, also heard voices in their heads. And they were locked away. I didn't want to be locked away. And I wasn't sure, but I always felt exhilarated whenever I recalled that particular momentous experience. It was in a very ordinary setting. I was walking home from my primary school, Heathery now Primary School in East Kilbride, just outside of Glasgow. And I was walking home to save the bus fare, because in Scotland you learn from a very early age to save money, not to spend money so easily. And so my best friend Robert Napier and myself were walking home, and he was discussing a particular boy that had just joined our class. He was from Poland. And in those days, one of the things that we did in the primary school, we had what was known as PE, physical education. And before we went into the gym, we had to change our outside shoes and put on plimsoll shoes. And so went then, of course, take off your socks and shoes and put on plimsoll shoes. So when this Polish boy took off his socks and shoes, a few boys noticed that he had 6 toes in one of his feet. I'm talking about way back in 1957. And in those days we hadn't seen many examples of that type of extra digits in people's bodies. So he was immediately branded as a weirdo. And I didn't like that. I was speaking to my friend, I said, you know, we should just accept him the way that God's made him. God's made him like that, so he's just the same as us, except he's got 1 extra toe in 1 foot, big deal. So my friend turned to me and said, "Ah, David, if you carry on talking like that, you'll end up being a minister when you grow up." And just at that moment, this amazing disembodied voice, of course, in a voice and using words that I could understand at that age of 9, told me very clearly about this tremendous religious experience. And I thought it was my friend Robert, you know, playing tricks with me, but actually I noticed that his lips weren't moving, so that voice didn't come from his mouth. It came from some disembodied personality. So I was brought up as a Protestant, and when I got into my teenage years, I became a Sunday school teacher in our local kirk, the West Kirk in Scotland. And but one thing troubled me. I was really concerned about the nature of the soul, and what was the soul. And why is it that God, according to the Christian doctrine, only gave souls to human beings and not to the animals and the plants and the trees and the reptiles and so on? And so when I used to consult with the elders of the kirk, they couldn't really give me a very valid reply. It varied like anything too. It's as if they themselves weren't sure what the answer was. So then I started doubting myself. I thought, well, if they can't tell me, and I can't really tell, you know, these young students in my class at Sunday school, maybe I should stop preaching about the Bible. And then I went to senior secondary school. I became a prefect, and I had to stand in front of the assembly, school assembly every morning with the headmaster, Mr. Tate, and read from the New Testament. And so I became quite skeptical. And then I thought, well, I'll become an agnostic. Then I moved down to England at the age of 18. I had a very good job in the civil service in the City of London. My office was in King William Street, right on London Bridge. And so I didn't really have much to do with going to church and thinking of God. And sometimes, of course, I'd, you know, be walking around the West End of London and sometimes in Notting Hill, because I was living in Earl's Court at that time with other civil servants, analysing the words of Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and the usual things that were being done in the 60s. And so somehow or another, a week before my 21st birthday, I noticed this piece of paper on the pavement, and I picked it up, and it just said very simply, on this particular date, it was the 27th of July, we're going to meet at Speaker's Corner near Marble Arch in Hyde Park, and if you want to come along with us on this procession, you can bring a fruit, a leaf, or a flower as an offering. And I didn't know it was the Hare Krishnas, because actually I'd met the Hare Krishnas way back in early '69. They seemed to pop up in every place I used to go to. I used to go to a club called the Arts Lab in Drury Lane. It was run by an American called Jim Hines. I had a good friend of mine at that time. He was a very famous English London poet. His name is Michael Chapman. Very tall, he's 6'8", and he had very bright red hair, and he was a very, very bold character. And we also used to meet in a place called Bungee's, around the corner from this theatre that was playing The Mousetrap that ran for about 45 years. So we were always in the West End, and I would see the devotees, and whenever I saw them, I'd always cross the street to avoid them. a friend of mine from Newcastle, a Geordie, he got an invitation to a Sunday Love Feast. That's before the devotees moved to Bury Place. This is in Bedgerton Street, which used to be the offices of a very famous underground newspaper called the International Times, IT. So if you wanted to know where the latest venues were of Pink Floyd, T-Rex, The Crazy World of Arthur Brown, and so on, you would get that newspaper. And the devotees somehow or another met the owner of that newspaper, and they were moving premises. So he said, sure, you can use that place. So, yeah, they were in Drury Lane at the Arts Lab. They appeared in the Roundhouse and Chalk Farm. And even in the summertime, when there was so many free concerts going on, featuring amazing groups like the Stones and Fleetwood Mac and so many other groups, there were the Hare Krishnas, dancing with their arms upraised and flowing in the breeze. And my friend, he went along to the Sunday feast, and he came back and he was absolutely convinced that these Hare Krishnas were putting drugs in the food. He came back completely intoxicated. So I thought, well, I don't mind taking drugs, but I like to know when I'm taking them. So again, that kind of was like very off-putting to me, that kind of impression that he gave me. And I wasn't a very good candidate for becoming a devotee. Even one day I was walking with my Irish friend. We were walking down Portobello Road, and there was a group of Hare Krishnas chanting on the street. And one Scottish girl came over, and she was selling Back to Godhead magazines. And my friend, he bought one. And then she tried to sell me one. And I said, well, let me have a look at it. And she gave it to me. And I opened it up, and it had all these adverts for head shops in San Francisco. And I thought, we've got head shops in London. I mean, why do I have to pay money, to know about head shops in San Francisco? I wasn't about to take a plane and fly over there. So I thought, well, my friend's got one. I'll share the magazine with him. Thank you, but no thank you. So I refused to take a magazine. But this piece of paper that I found a week before my 21st birthday reminded me again, of course, of that particular premonition. So I decided to go to visit Speaker's Corner that Sunday. And I'd been going quite regularly because there were some speakers there. There was a very fiery Methodist preacher who stood in an orange box, and he was actually quite a charismatic character. And the amazing thing is that his grandson became a Hare Krishna. That's Krishna Arjuna Das. And he was actually an amazing book distributor in the 80s. And his grandfather's name was Lord.Siva, head of the Methodist Church at that time. And I noticed beside him there's this more than large number of Indians gathered around a float. And I wasn't too sure what the float, actually represented. And I got a little closer just to see what was going on. I saw two healthy ladies, and they were putting up a step ladder at the side of this float, and they were carrying figures up onto the top of the float. Then I walked around the back, and I was trying to figure out what was going on here. And this tall American devotee in saffron pointed to me and he said, "Hey, you." And I wasn't sure if he was pointing to me or somebody next to me, because there was a crowd of us standing around. And I went, "You mean me?" He said, "Yeah, you." He said, "You look like you're pretty healthy and strong, so why don't you help us push this cart? We're going to start moving in the procession." And so that was my first opportunity to engage in devotional service. Didn't last very long, because as Shamsuna mentioned the other evening, we pushed the cart maybe 150 yards, and then the wheels fell apart. Then later on I got to know that these wheels came from old wheelbarrows used in the Covent Garden fruit and vegetable market. And the wheelbarrows had been thrown out because they weren't functioning properly anymore. And as Shamsuna mentioned, they didn't have any money at that time, so they cobbled, the first wrath cart together getting free donations of wheels and wood and so on. And then they made an announcement. Once, you know, we realized what had happened, and of course we couldn't travel any further because the wheels were rent asunder. So someone with a megaphone made an announcement. We're going to continue with the procession, and we're asking everyone to please chant Hare Krishna with us. And that's the first time I chanted Hare Krishna in my life. So I can say that certainly Srila Prabhupada was a miracle maker, because he brought this very traditional festival, ancient festival that's been going on in Jagannath Puri and Orissa for thousands of years to the Western countries. And I feel greatly blessed that somehow or another I didn't miss that opportunity of attending the very first London Ratha Yatra in 1969. So then you can say my fate was sealed. And actually I became very enthusiastic, and by the time we got down to Trafalgar Square, that's of course where the procession ended, I was really anxious to know more, to find out more. And I became very attracted to Jamuna's singing, because unbeknownst to me, Jamuna and her sister Janaki were those two healthy ladies that were standing in the front of the Rath cart. They got down, and of course they went ahead of the procession, and they were holding kirtan there. So she was leading the kirtan, and then after the kirtan stopped, Gurudas spoke, and then they distributed some orange slices and some peanuts. That was the feast, the Mahaprasad, not the feast, but it was Mahaprasad that was being distributed to everybody. And then Mukunda took the microphone, and he started requesting the crowd, well, we'd just like to let you know that we've acquired a new temple in the West End of London, and we're looking for volunteers to help paint and decorate the temple. So I had, as a part-time job along with working for the civil service, I was working the weekends painting flats in Gooch Street, just off Tottenham Court Road, not very far from here, to earn a bit more pocket money. So I thought, yeah, I don't mind volunteering. So I came up, and maybe perhaps I approached Mukunda too close for comfort. And so I said, where's the temple? I'd like to come and help you. He said, oh, we're not telling anybody where the temple is. But I said, but you just announced that you wanted volunteers. If you don't tell us where it is, how are we going to find out to go there and volunteer? He said, well, you give us your number, give us your address, and we'll contact you. So I did that. I was living in North London, not far from Muswell Hill. And a few days later, I got this visit from this English boy, Kulashekar. And I was so happy he had come, because straight after that gathering finished in Trafalgar Square, I went over to Oxford Street, because he had talked about chanting on beats, and there was an Indian shop on Oxford Street, this end of Oxford Street, called India Craft. And I went in there and bought some sandalwood beads, and I started chanting. After one of the English devotees, I think it was Digvijaya, he showed me how to chant on the beats. So when I got home to my friends, at that time I was staying with some fellow Scotsmen from the same town as me, from East Kilbride. And they'd never seen me chant on beats before, and they thought, this is curious, what's happened? And I said, well, I went to this Far Out festival, and I'm into chanting Hare Krishna. And then Kulashekar arrived a few days later, and he took me down to Berry Place. And he put on a single. This is a single that was, of course, recorded in the summer of 1969. It was the devotees, the Radha Krishna temple devotees, chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. And what impressed me was that it was produced by George Harrison, because, again, like many of my generation, I worship the Beatles like anything. I even had a Beatle haircut. I collected all their albums. And so I was well impressed. And it was really beautifully produced. Then he said, oh, here's another treat. Before we start work, I want you to listen to this LP. And of course, in those days, we didn't have MP3s or CDs. We just had record players and the stylus and the, the plastic records. And so there was an LP, and that was the recording of Srila Prabhupada in New York, which was produced in 1967 on the Happening label. And I heard Srila Prabhupada, his voice singing the Maha Mantra, then his explanation, and as soon as I heard his voice, I knew immediately this is my spiritual master. And so from that moment on, I couldn't wait until I could actually meet him face to face. And we didn't have to wait very long because Srila Prabhupada came. This was end of July, beginning of August. And Prabhupada had flown from Boston to Hamburg in Germany. And because we were, at that time, when Prabhupada was thinking of coming to England, we were already not living in Bury Place any longer, but we had moved out to the countryside, to Tittenhurst Park, to John Lennon's new property that belonged to the Cadbury family, Tittenhurst Park. So we had a row of gardeners' cottages that we had to do some repair work on because it had been empty for some time. And we also used an orangery on the property as the temple room. And if you want to see some vintage photos of the Beatles and the devotees sitting down and eating prasadam of wet, soggy paper plates, then you can always log on to iskonmedia.com. Because there's lots of photos there from that time that Gurudas took. Of course, Gurudas was very expert at taking photographs at every given opportunity. But when Prabhupada came off the plane, in those days, you didn't go straight into the building. You had to get off the plane, walk down the steps, walk across the tarmac, the runway. And we were all in a group in one part, very close to the plane. And as soon as Prabhupada came down the stairs, we paid our obeisances, and Prabhupada, of course, saw us. He waved before we paid our obeisances. We waved to him. Then he walked over, and it was an amazing thing happened. As we were all paying our obeisances, Prabhupada came round to every one of us and rubbed us on the back, like this. So personal, and including the ladies. Everybody got that experience. I thought, wow, he's such a loving person. I don't even know him. It seems like he knows me. Then we went into the VIP lounge, and the question was asked, well, what happened? Was there a kirtan? Was it a loud kirtan? Was it a mellow kirtan? Was it a quiet kirtan? No, it was a raucous kirtan. That's the answer to that question that nobody could answer last night. I remember because that was the first time I saw Prabhupada. So to me, I mean, everything that he did, every behavior, every action, I was just absorbing like anything. And what was nice was that one of the national papers of that time published a full figure photograph of Srila Prabhupada playing kartals. And you can see he's in this ecstatic trance playing the kartals. And we were just jumping up and down like anything. It was just an amazing, amazing kirtan. And then after the kirtan, then the journalists came and they asked, oh, Swami, why have you come to London? And of course, that's when Prabhupada said, I've come to London to teach what you have forgot, love of God. And in the ecstasy of being once more for the American devotees in Prabhupada's presence, but for me it was the first time experience. John Lennon had been very gracious to offer Srila Prabhupada his white Rolls-Royce car. And so the original plan was that one of the American devotees, Gurudas, Shamsundar, Mukunda, they had worked out that one of them was going to accompany Prabhupada in the car. And we followed up in a canvas top Land Rover. But what happened was, we all wanted to pay our obeisances so many times to Srila Prabhupada and thanking him for coming and visiting England that no one got into the car with Srila Prabhupada. So the driver, of course, he wasn't a devotee, he was the driver of the Rolls-Royce car. And he was given the instructions to drop off the passengers, of course, Prabhupada and his servant, Purushottam, they were the two that went into the car, and nobody else. And then the driver, of course, drove off. And of course, a Rolls-Royce car drives a lot smoother and a lot quicker than a canvas-top Land Rover filled up with about 15 devotees. So when we got to the front gate of the property of Tittenhurst Park, there was Prabhupada standing with his luggage with Purushottam, because the driver's instruction was, as soon as he got to the front gate, to drop off the passengers, which he did. He followed that instruction to the letter. And of course, Prabhupada didn't know where to go. So he just stood there. And so, of course, then we realized that Prabhupada had been standing waiting for at least 5 or 10 minutes, you know. But he didn't get upset. All he said was, as soon as we all piled out of the Land Rover, he said, "So, where do I stay?" And then we all, of course, showed Prabhupada to the gardener's cottages. And then Prabhupada went upstairs. He made sure all his belongings were put in the proper place and all his valuables and so on. Of course, he was traveling too, at that time, with little Radha Krishna deities about that size. They were kept in a little white vinyl zip bag, just a little white bag about that size. They were his personal Radha Krishna deities that traveled with him wherever he went. And so then Prabhupada wanted to see the temple. And in the temple, there's a very simple altar. There were 3 sets of little Jagannath deities about that size, each set belonging to each couple. So Gurudas and Jamuna had their Jagannath Subhadra Baladev, and Shamsud and Malati had their Jagannath Subhadra Baladev, Mukunda and Janika had their Jagannath Subhadra Baladev. And then below that there was a color photograph of Prabhupada playing kartals and chanting in Golden Gate Park, San Francisco. And behind him was that Papi and Mashi deity of Kartomishi Krishna. And Prabhupada liked that pose of Krishna. And one time, one devotee asked, what is the meaning of Kartomishi Krishna? And, you know, he's standing with his flute and a rope, and he's kind of, you know, it's a little cowherd boy. And so Prabhupada replied, that is cheeky Krishna. Cheeky Krishna. Kartomishi Krishna. And then, after Prabhupada came in, paid his obeisances to the altar, then he ascended not the Vyasasan, because we didn't know what a Vyasasan looked like. It wasn't like what we see here. It was a dais. It was a big box with steps at the side. I'd helped put that together with plywood. And then there was a very simple book rest and a little light to illuminate the book on the book rest. And you can also see what that dais looks like if you go on iskonmedia.com, because we did pose with Srila Prabhupada. There's some formal photographs of us all together around Prabhupada's dais. Then he instructed Jamuna to lead the kirtan, and she sat on the floor and played harmonium. And then Prabhupada went like this, meaning that we should dance in a circle, in a clockwise direction, with Jamuna sitting in the middle, playing the harmonium and leading the kirtan. So he liked us to do that. He liked us to dance in a circle. And it was a big hall, so it was quite easy to do. There's lots of space in that hall. And the hall was decorated very simply because we didn't really have any money. Although the single was doing well, it was in the charts. We had gone to White City, to the BBC television studios, and we had performed on Top of the Pops. And there's a whole story connected with that too that Gurudas tells very nicely in this book. How the stage manager had hired some professional dancing girls, 6 of them. And they were very scantily dressed to show off their long legs, and they were in high-heel shoes, and you know, everything was looking very exposed. And Gurudas got a little upset and said, "Why did you do this? Why did you? We didn't ask you to hire these ladies. We don't need our act to be embellished like this. We're chanting the names of God. This is something that has nothing to do with dancing girls. This is not like a pop song, like normal pop songs." And the guy said, "Well, I've already paid them. They're here. They're waiting." And then Gurudas said, "Well, if you insist that they go on, they're going to go on by themselves, because we refused, and this is a live program. So it's a live production. So all you're going to see on your TV screens is 6 dancing girls, nothing to do with us." And so he had this this chart with all the things that he was meant to do, and he threw it down very violently and said, "Okay, go on." And, you know, we had ruined his moment. So we went on. Fortunately, by Krishna's mercy, he relented, because later on, when Prabhupada was staying at Titnar's Park, he wanted to see that program. He wanted to see us chanting on television. And he did. He actually saw. He watched the whole program later on. It was a half-hour program on Thursday night from 7:30 till 8. And that evening, we were the last group to be shown on that particular evening. And Prabhupada was so pleased that the Hare Krishna mantra had become a household word, because 15 million people watched that television music program. It was very, very popular in the 60s and the 70s. And he said, now Hare Krishna has become a household name, like Ajax and Weetabix and whatever else. It's advertised on TV. The power of live television. So after the kirtan, it went on for half an hour. Prabhupada stopped the kirtan, and then he spoke. And I had asked the devotees, well, what does Prabhupada do? I mean, when he comes to a new place, does he follow the same schedule everywhere he goes? And I was told, yes. There'll be kirtan, there'll be a talk, then he'll ask for questions. So I thought, okay, I've got a question for Srila Prabhupada. I'll wait until he finishes talking. And because I was kind of a little bit nervous, Hare Krishna, Kamanaji, Balaji. So I didn't really listen to anything Prabhupada said. I was just really fixed. I tried to just focus on what I wanted to say or ask. And I was just waiting for that moment to come around, which it did after about 30 minutes. Prabhupada said, any questions? I put my hand up immediately. Nobody else put their hand up. I was the only one there. There wasn't many, there was about 15 or 20 of us. And he said, yes. I said, when can I take initiation? And he looked at me, because that was the first time he heard me talk. That we will see. That's how he answered. And again, this is Lord Jagannath's mercy, I'm sure. Because after all, those were the deities in a tiny form that we were worshipping in those days. Because of course Radha Londonishvaras didn't come until a little bit later. So the devotee I was staying with, there were 3 gardeners' cottages that we were occupying. On one side were the unmarried men, the brahmacharis. I was still back to Dave, obviously I wasn't initiated. I asked to be initiated, the Prabhupada said, that we will see. So I was staying in the same room as that American devotee who had invited me to help push Lord Jagannath's Rath cart. That was Trivikram from Buffalo, New York. And so he was Prabhupada's official masseur, an official driver too. Because although he had a university degree, he had gotten a job as a taxi driver because it paid better than any university degree job he could find. He was quite practical. And I don't know if that makes sense to students these days. I think there's a lot of qualified taxi drivers and a lot of qualified other workers that have university degrees in that kind of category of work. So, you know, we got on extremely well. And of course, the next day he was meant to have gone into massage Srila Prabhupada, but I noticed that he wasn't stirring from his sleeping bag in the morning. And actually, he kind of looked really much in pain. I didn't know what was wrong. Then he said, "Oh, Dave, I think you're going to have to go and massage Prabhupada today." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I've come down with this terrible toothache. I feel miserable. I'm in so much pain. I just can't do it. I can't do it." Now this is the day after, just as Prabhupada, to take initiation. Of course, now here, Krishna is accelerating the process of getting to know me. You have to be very careful what you desire for Krishna. Man proposes, God disposes. And I said, you know, I've never massaged anyone in my life. And you're asking me to massage this great saintly Indian spiritual master that I only met yesterday? He said, yeah, why not? It's really easy. So what do you mean it's easy? Well, you just start with the head, get some mustard oil, and you rub long strokes on the head. And then after some time, he'll tell you to massage his back, and you, instead of using sandalwood oil, you use mustard oil, and so you heat up some mustard oil in your palms of your hands, you rub it together, and start massaging him in long strokes. And he'll keep saying one word, again and again. Harder. 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 And so you just keep massaging him harder and harder and harder until he stops saying that word. And then you go on to the arms, then the belly, then the legs, and then he'll say, finished. And I said, it's that easy? He said, oh yeah, yeah. I said, how long does it last? He said, oh, hour and a half, 2 hours. Well, I was, 21 years old, and I thought, well, I'm quite fit. He's not that tall, so there's not much to massage. He's quite small. That's what I was thinking, like that. And so, yeah, okay. I said, all right, if you think I'm up for it. He said, yeah, you're strong enough. So, but I kept thinking in the back of my mind, well, I've just joined. I don't really know any slokas from Bhagavad Gita. Of course, in those days, we didn't have that many books either. My books, I spent my last £8, it all went on Prabhupada's books. I got a set of Prabhupada's original Bhagavatams printed in Delhi, in India in 1962. First canto, volume 1, 2, and 3. And I also got Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and the Macmillan Bhagavad Gita, the abridged version, with the black outline of Lord Vishnu on the front with the blue background, and a Nectar of Devotion. And so that wiped me up completely. I had no money after that. I spent my last £8 on Prabhupada's books. And so I was a little nervous. I kept thinking, well, what if Prabhupada asked me a really difficult question like, well, what's, quote, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, text number 13. I go, I'm sorry, Prabhupada, I have no idea what that is. I didn't want to disappoint him. So I was a little tentative, a little apprehensive also. Anyway, so I was given a gamcha, and I was told where to go, and there was a straw mat, and the mat was put out, and Prabhupada came in, I paid my obeisances, and Prabhupada started undressing and putting on his gamcha. And then the first question he asked me, he says, where are you from? I said, from Scotland, Srila Prabhupada. Then he asked, how far is Edinburgh from London? I said, 400 miles. How long does it take to go by train from London to Edinburgh? In those days, about 8 hours. And then the next question, where were you educated? I said, in Scotland, Srila Prabhupada. Did you learn British history? I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. When was the Battle of Trafalgar? You know when the Battle of Trafalgar was? Anybody? If you were asked that question?
1805.
Exactly, 1805, yes. Well, you're showing your age now, because... When was the Battle of Waterloo? That was a tough one, because I kept thinking of a symphony, but that's 1812, I thought that's not that. 1815. I said, oh, you know British history too? He said, yes. I also learned British history. Next question. Do you know any Scottish lords? And I went, no, Srila Prabhupada, I don't seem to remember any Scottish lords. He said, I knew one, Lord Zetland. And it's really funny because I thought, he must mean Shetland. Because there's the Orkneys and the Shetlands. I never heard of anybody called Lord Zetland. I thought this must be wrong pronunciation. And I really was almost like about to try to say, don't you mean Lord Shetland? And I'm glad I didn't, because actually, of course, I read in the history books that Lord Zetland, he was the governor of Bengal. There was such a person. And the reason, of course, that Prabhupada knew all these things is because he went to Scottish Churches College. And all his teachers were Scottish. So if you just think about it, and it took me many years to come around to this way of thinking, that here I was, a Scottish student of an Indian teacher. And when Prabhupada was young, he was an Indian student with Scottish teachers. So the roles were reversed. The roles were reversed. I know I'm hogging the place, the time at the moment, excuse me for that. Anyway, so I suppose the conclusion was that Srila Prabhupada asked me questions I could answer. And that really put me at my ease. And then I felt very secure, actually. I thought, he's such a wonderful person. He knows I'm a complete idiot. And so he's asking me questions, at least I can give some kind of reasonable reply. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I apologize for taking up so much time.
You can always speak again.
But when I joined the temple, Mandikini and Aditi were crucial members of the community. So I want to hear from.
Maybe first Aditi, because she didn't speak yet,
Yeah.
Arundhati and Sakshi Gopal.
Yes.
And if there is time.
Historically, you speak.
So, very shortly, actually the pillar of the deity worship in Burhi place is really Jamuna, because she learned everything directly from Srila Prabhupada. And so I hope she will be able to tell you everything she learned from Srila Prabhupada at another time. But somehow or other, after about 10 or 11 months, she had to go to India to join the World Sankirtan Party and to assist Srila Prabhupada there in India with our 6 exalted devotees. No, Mukunda and Shabbat didn't go.
They didn't.
Just the four of them went.
No, 5, including Saraswati.
Yeah, 5 including Saraswati was a full member of the team. So during all this time, as we were talking together the other day, Jamuna was teaching me how to assist her in deity worship. And I was pretty useless, but I was very fortunate to learn from her. And the way of deity worship Srila Prabhupada told her was actually Vrindavan consciousness. It was quite a simple technical way of deity worship, and Vrindavan consciousness, because it was very personal. Like Radha, Srimati Radharani and Krishna were really persons, and the pujari was the servant. And as we were doing deity worship, and I'm sure all of you who were engaged in the deity worship with Shri Radha Londonishvaras can say the same thing. There is a lot of reciprocation, just very small little things like seeing a beautiful flower in the garden, picking the flower, putting the flower near Srimati Radharani's ear. And there was a reciprocation. She would look different. So time went on doing this service, and the deities were really the center of everyone's life. And historically, I just remember something, and maybe it is important to mention it, so you can integrate it. At one point, during this not even a year I spent with the deities, there was one devotee, the first sannyasi we saw in Europe, who came in the temple in Bury Place. And when he saw our very simple deity worship, that was not the same that was taking place in Los Angeles, because in Los Angeles it was more in the mood of awe and reverence for the deities were Rukmini, Dwarkadish. So it was more in the mood of Vaikuntha. So that devotee thought it was really Maya. And it was so simple, and he said it's really sentimental, and so everybody was getting quite confused. And he really wanted to change the standard. And myself, I was so attached to the way Yamuna taught us. And I thought, oh no, I should never change the standard. But after maybe a week, many devotees insisted that the standard should be changed. It would be better, it would be more elaborated. So at the end, I changed it and did the other way. So technically, unfortunately, I don't remember exactly, but it doesn't matter. But in a way, it was maybe more worship to Srila Prabhupada, or there were good things about it, but I changed it. So I wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada, and actually, when he replied, he said, actually, once the deities are installed, we should never change the standard. We should keep it. So it was a chastisement. But then he's so kind that he said, but I understand that you wanted to increase your devotion to your spiritual master. So I accept it. But this was important, never to change the standard once the deities are installed. So after this small year, I had to go to another service, and a wonderful devotee, Lila Shakti, took over, and maybe one day she will tell us all of her adventure. And then all this time, there was my dear god sister Aditi. We did some service for Radha Londonishvaras, and she's going to tell us her remembrances about it.
So I came about 3 months after the deities had been installed, and Yamuna was the pujari, and the 3 French girls had joined before me, Mandikini, Jyotirmayi, and Ilavati. And I was the next person to join, and at that time we didn't go to Mangalartik, only Yamuna went to Mangalartik. And we would sleep on the floor in our sleeping bags, and we would wake up at 5:30. And first we would clean our floor and have little duties that we would do. And if I remember rightly, well, that very place temple was really beautiful. It was that redwood shape in kind of a chapel form all the way, and then there was a beautiful bluish purple carpet with lovely pillows all around the edges of the. It was a very beautiful temple, And there was a picture of Murli Manohar playing the flute right as you would go out the door. And you always see that picture of Krishna on the wall. And one of the first services I did was a blunder. I was the new girl. And Yamuna sent me upstairs to polish the seat. So I had Duraglit in my hand and a rag. And nobody was in the temple room, and I had no clue, you know, what seat I was supposed to clean. So I opened the little gate, and the only seat I saw was next to Radha and Krishna. And then I realized this is cloth. How can I polish cloth? And in the meantime, somebody ran down and told Yamuna, oh, the new girl, she's on the altar. So lo and behold, Prabhupada's Vyasasana was just to the right in front of the altar, and the bottom part was copper sheets in the form of lotus flower. So that was what I was supposed to polish. And then I remember Mukunda asked me if I typed, and I lied, because the last thing I wanted to do was be in an office all day. And I loved Harinam, and so I ended up in the kitchen a lot, and I wasn't on Harinam. So a lot of my service was actually preparing food for Radha Londonishvaras. And I really got into that as a service and wanting to please them. And also sometimes wanting to please the devotees. So at one point, Tribhuvanath and I used to go down to buy the boga. When Mandikini and I didn't go down to beg, we would go down to buy boga when we had money. And there was a beautiful blackberries. It was summertime, and I wanted to make blackberry cobbler for the deities and the devotees. And this man wouldn't sell me the blackberries. And I would see other people come, and they would buy, and they would take away. And I don't know what came over me, but I took a box. So we came back to the temple, and it turns out that man who wouldn't sell me the blackberries was our next door neighbor who hated us. So I ended up going to jail for half a day. And I remember I was going to tell the judge that, you know, sometimes anger overcomes you, and you do a crazy thing. So I did. I told him that, and he excused me. But actually, I was always waiting for the time when Prabhupada would come. And we expected him to come that summer of 1970 for the first, well, actually, I'm finding out it's the second Rath Yatra. And Prabhupada didn't show up, and I was really heartbroken. I was just so heartbroken. And actually, I had to wait a whole another year until I saw Prabhupada. So that actually made a year and a half. I really needed purification. And so I had to serve for a year and a half before I got to see Prabhupada physically. And, and when Prabhupada came, all hell broke loose. It seems like I had been cooking for the deities, for the devotees, for a year and a half almost. And when Malati arrived with Prabhupada, she said, oh, you're cooking so nicely for the devotees, why don't you cook for Prabhupada? So I said, sure, okay. And at the same time, I had come from America, and I had just stopped off in London going on my way to Copenhagen. And so Krishna kind of presented a test, because at the same time he sent my old boyfriend. I was walking up the stairs with Prabhupada's plate to give to the servant, and my old boyfriend came down the stairs. So it was a little troubling for me, but I knew what I wanted was to serve Prabhupada. So one evening program, I stayed behind to cook for the deities, and Prabhupada had a program outside. And when Prabhupada came back from the program, I was sitting with my friend in the hallway. And right away I could see Prabhupada didn't like that. And the next day was Brahman initiation day. And Leela Shakti and I had already gotten initiation by mail the previous summer. So I was cooking for Prabhupada, and I would go up and down to see where the line was for my turn. And I had no Guru Dakshi, and I remember Leela Shakti had 3 roses, yellow roses, and she gave me one of them. Finally I went in, and it was so peaceful with Prabhupada, and he was so relaxed, and I never thought I would understand what this finger thing was. I was worried about that. And he had me sit down, and he told me the Gayatri and showed me how to do the fingers. And then I really appreciated Prabhupada, and I just said, I was starting to give my obeisances, and I said, Prabhupada, you are so kind. And his face just lit up, and it was so bright that I couldn't be in the presence of that light. And so I bowed down and offered my obeisances. And then when I rose back up, it was like as if a cloud had passed over Prabhupada. And I didn't know what it was, but I went back downstairs, and let's take some water. In the course of that, Prabhupada had asked me if I would cook him parathas, because I had made parathas the night before, and he had taken some. So I said, yes, Prabhupada, I will make for you. I've been cooking for you, and I'll include that in your lunch. So when I went back downstairs, this was Lord Balaram's birthday. In England and France, you always have this kind of dry thunder and lightning, you know, big booms. So down the kitchen, which was under the temple, the next floor down, Jai Hari was cooking the feast for Lord Balaram. I was in a corner cooking for Prabhupada, and Shamsundar comes down and he says, Prabhupada wants to know why it is that you are cooking for him and you're just now receiving Brahmin initiation. And I said, well, your good wife, Malati, she invited me to cook, and that's why. So then Shamsundar went back upstairs and came back down, and I said, actually I've been cooking for the deities, even I wasn't initiated, I think. I was in charge of the kitchen, and so up and down, and finally Shamsundar came down and he said, Prabhupada says that no one should cook for the deities or for the spiritual master if they're not Brahmin initiated. And it was a real lesson for me and for all of us, because and still there are places in our movement where people are cooking for the deities who aren't second initiated, and sometimes not even first initiated. So that standard was really impressed in my mind at that time. So it was okay. Prabhupada was pleased with the lunch, and had been pleased with the lunch during the week. In the meantime, in the kitchen, Jai Hari's pouring the syrup for the halva, and he spills it, and people are jumping up and down in the kitchen because there's hot syrup on the floor, and all this discussion is going on. So finally, then after that, it seemed like it was the next day, and Hari Vilas had come from Paris, and they needed to cook in Paris. They needed someone to become a wife, and they chose me to go to Paris to get married, and then Prabhupada wanted a temple in Geneva, Switzerland. So it seems like all this year and a half I'd been waiting for the time when I would be Brahmin initiated and I could serve Radha Londonishvaras on the altar. And I realized it wasn't my destiny. And so Mandikini took myself, and I think Leela Shakti, right after we got Brahmin initiation, and I got to touch their lotus feet. And then I was in Prabhupada's room saying goodbye, and with Hari Vilas.
You did an outfit.
I did what?
An outfit.
Oh, I did do sewing and I did cooking, but there was something special about actually being with the deities, and I really desired that, but that wasn't meant for me at that time. So Hari Vilas and I went into Prabhupada's room to say goodbye because we were going to France that day. And Prabhupada was very encouraging. He kept looking at me and smiling and saying that Geneva, it's a very, very important city. He wanted a temple there. Because of the United Nations, it was very important. And he said, I will come and visit. He said he would come and visit there. And so he also said that we would not go to the port in France that we had planned on going to. And sure enough, when we got to Dover, they said, because of weather conditions, we would have to go to one place and not the one that we had thought we were going to go to. So my history then went on in France and India. So I'll turn it over to the other English devotees to continue.
Briefly, very briefly. Really just to say, well, I wanted to say that whoever decorated the altars today, I think they're just stunning. You know, I painted this backdrop. Leela Shakti, for years she was saying to me, you've got to make a backdrop with Big Ben in it, because she loves London. And I was thinking, how can you do that? You know, Big Ben and Krishna just don't go together. But finally, you know, she persuaded me to do it. And somehow or another, in the process of painting that scene, and the other backdrop is Battersea Park, because that's where Jagannath used to go for Rath Yatra. I realised, I just understood how, you know, when anything is connected to Krishna, it becomes transcendental. So even the red buses and the taxis, which are on the altar now, and the phone box. Did you see there's a telephone box there? When it's connected to Krishna, it looks just fine to me. When I joined the temple, one of the I mean, it was the devotees, of course. You know, I just fell in love with them all. But within a couple of weeks of my joining, the original 4 devotees who were with us all this week, they all went to India. And Mandikini particularly, you know, was left in sole responsibility for the deity worship, weren't you? Dhananjaya was the temple president, and he gave me my first, one very important service he gave me. He said, now, Richard, you know, every morning after Mangalarti, you must go down to the kitchen and get the Mangalarti sweets and put them in a special plate and bring them up to my room, and I will look after them.
You didn't tell us that.
Anyway, after a few weeks, you went to Amsterdam, didn't you? And so there was Tribhunath, of course, who was the great sort of fighting, inspiring person. Despite his youthfulness, he kind of kept us on the road. And Mandikini was doing all the deity worship, and of course she was helped by Aditi and Leela Shakti. And it seemed like they were just working so hard, and it really attracted me to see these 3 young girls who were working so hard in the kitchen. And one thing I wanted to do was to help them in some way in the kitchen, and I heard that you told me a story, one of you, I can't remember, it was probably Aditi, it was probably you, that you had gone on a preaching outing, and the devotees had stopped off somewhere and picked some blackberries, and then you turned them into jam. But the jam had all been used up, so I thought, yes, that's something I could do. So just the Sunday before I moved in, I went down to Sussex and I spent all weekend filling buckets and buckets of blackberries and brought them up and gave them to you, and they were made into jam. The only other thing I wanted to say, and then I'm going to ask Sakshi to say a few words, I'll pass it to you, is that one thing very extraordinary about the deity worship is that Krishna, you know, and Radharani, they stood on an altar that was only 2 feet off the ground or less, and the curtain was only just enough space for Mandikini to sit in front of the altar and do the bathing ceremony. So, you know, if you were sitting there and I was Krishna, that's how close you could be. You know, you could reach out and touch Krishna. it was so intimate, and Krishna was low. You know, if you stood up, you were looking down on him. That feeling of intimacy is just such a wonderful privilege for us all to have had. I think Sakshi will have some memories of that, and Arundhati. Okay, well, Arundhati.
I don't know, maybe I shouldn't be up here, but I didn't even know that I was coming here to London till about a week ago. Somehow I heard about the festival, and there's many festivals in ISKCON, and I don't usually go to too many of them actually, but when I happened to hear about it from Yadubara. He wrote to me about something else, and he said, "Are you going to the festival in London?" And I had a very strong feeling to come. And especially when I heard it was the 40th anniversary of Radha Londonishvaras, and I guess because I came here in 1971 with my husband at that time, Pradyumna, and we were on our way to India, and we stopped here, I think it was in the summer of '71, and Srila Prabhupada was here then. And we ended up staying here for a number of months, and I did get to serve the deities during the time I was here, and it was the second pair of deities that I got to worship. I did get to serve Srila Prabhupada's personal deities, which if there's time I can tell you about that. I just have a very strong, heartfelt feeling about Radha Londonishvaras. I don't have a whole lot of stories to tell. I just feel very fortunate that I got to do arti to them a few times and cook for them, and they're very, very special deities in my heart. So I'm just so glad I could come and share a little bit. I didn't really know I was going to be speaking. I do have one little story. When I came here, we also had our son with us, Aniruddha, and he was about a year old at the time. And we were up in Srila Prabhupada's room having darshan, and I was trying to keep my son, control him, because he was running all over the place, getting into everything, and everybody else was just sitting still and listening to Prabhupada. And Aniruddha, at one point, he went up to Srila Prabhupada's slippers, and he took one of Prabhupada's slippers and he started putting them on his feet, his own feet. And the devotees all jumped up when they saw that and went to grab the slippers away from Ani, because offense, putting the guru's shoes on your feet is not a good thing to do. And Srila Prabhupada started laughing, and he said, "Leave him. He knows that the foot belongs with the shoe, and he is trying to put the two together." So Srila Prabhupada was so merciful. So many times, you know, people would, oh, that person's committing an offense, doing this and that, and Srila Prabhupada was so forgiving of us and gave us so much love. So we're having the arti now. Is that happening?
Normally we do, but if devotees want to continue, we can continue. I think that's okay. So it seems to be decided. We can observe like this. This is also kirtan.
So as I said, I don't have a whole lot of memories.
speaking.
You've got the microphone.
So I'm just so happy to be here. I don't know what else to say. One of my main memories of offering arti to the deities here was I was offering camphor lamp, and the camphor fell on my hand while I was offering the arti, and my hand caught on fire. And anyhow, I went like that and put it out and kept on offering the arti, and had to go to the hospital afterwards. Shall I speak about the deities that I served to Prabhupada? I don't know whether to get into that or if we should stick with England.
I suggest we can switch around, you know?
Okay.
So let Sakshi speak for a few minutes, and then if somebody else feels inspired, we can.
Okay.
Hare Krishna. I'd like to thank you for asking me to speak this evening. It's very nice to hear the words of my brothers and sisters. And just as Rancho extended his hand and said he was my old temple president, I'll say Rancho was my old temple president. Evam Parampara.
No stories, please.
Oh, there's lots of stories. I don't know, in Krishna consciousness, because we're personalists, we can't separate really our own personal experience from our preaching and our contact with devotees, our experience of the deities, of Srila Prabhupada, because we're personalists. There's a whole thread, all of us, we have so many threads of connection that we owe to gratitude, we're indebted to so many people. I'm actually indebted to my sister. She was a great fan of the Beatles, and she used to get the monthly Beatles fan club magazine. And in the magazine, one month it came, and there were these photographs of this stripy tents on a lawn somewhere in London, or a big house, and these shaven-headed Hare Krishnas, which I soon learnt, were somehow or other had a recording contract with Apple. And then at college, one chap, he had a Back to Godhead magazine, and one of the first Bhagavad Gitas, the abridged Macmillan version, and he said, "Hey man, you gotta read this." And I looked at this book, and the feeling I got was such a depth and gravity. I thought, if I open this book, my life is going to change, and I'm not ready for that yet. I said, yeah man, that looks really heavy, just, you know. But Krishna had other plans. Again, my sister went to a local kind of flea market where they sell second-hand records and equivalent to today's car boot sales. And she brought home a record, because it was on the Apple label. It was the Radha Krishna temple. And it had the famous Hare Krishna mantra on one side, which I used to sing when I used to go on the Christmas post as a student. You go posting letters at Christmas. I used to sing Hare Krishna all the time. It felt very nice. But there was, on the flip side of this, on the flip side, the A side and the B side, of course this is the same. You know, the actual sleeve is the same. There's Shamsundar, Malati, Gurudas, Janaki, Jamuna. Rancho's not on here yet. Kulashekar's here. And devotees, I don't know who they are. This is a very historic piece. And I used to look at this album, this cover, and I used to think, well, yeah, there's a guru there, and there's these monks, but who are the big puppets in the background? It's Jagannath Subhadra Balaram. So Lord Jagannath, he's a very public deity form. He comes out on Rath Yatra every year. And he so mercifully, he even appears on the record cover. So everyone who bought this, they got the darshan of Lord Jagannath, and Srila Prabhupada, and these seven devotees. And when they opened it up, and they, of course, they got this little. We've got the picture of the apple. That's the A side, and then there's the B side. Very cleverly, it's sliced in half, so you get the inside of the apples. And on this side, it had a track called "Prayer to the Spiritual Masters." Now, George, because of the Beatles again, we can't avoid the Beatles' influence in the 60s, both in terms of, genius music and introduction to Indian culture and introduction to Krishna consciousness. And since the sitar was popularized in some of the Beatles' tracks, a totally revolutionary sound. No one had heard anything like it. And I was eager to follow this through. Where could I find more of this music? And it was Ravi Shankar's album, Portrait of a Genius, which was very popular, which I since learned was also the album that George got. So we have similar tastes, nature. No, he was, the Hare Krishna mantra is fairly straightforward. But the sound, because the arrangement of the prayers to the spiritual master on this side, I'm not going to get into a big analysis of the music, but it features Shamsundar playing the Esraj, that's the bowed instrument, which is incredibly haunting. Oh, it's such a, and the arrangement on this, have any of you not heard this prayers to the spiritual masters? Have you not heard it? You should hear it. It is actually one of the most amazing arrangements I've heard.
Yeah, for some reason, it wasn't included on the Radha Krishna Temple album,
no,
was it?
No.
So a lot of people weren't aware.
Yeah. So the music starts, and then they start this chanting, and I've never heard, well, it was just a new, I was listening to the words, and listening, straining, I was eager, what is, I was bent down listening to the prayers to the spiritual master, totally unaware of what it was, what it meant, but I was listening very eagerly, very intently, and suddenly I had an experience that is very rare. I felt like honey was pouring down into my being from somewhere above me. And I fell out on the floor, kind of gasping for breath. And I put that down to the transparent sincerity of the devotees who were on this album. They were singing with their hearts for the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada. The whole mission in London wasn't done through duty. Overwhelmingly, it was done through love of Srila Prabhupada, an eagerness to please Srila Prabhupada. And that comes through in the prayers to the spiritual masters. Sometime later, a couple of years later, my material life was coming to a close. I was seriously despondent, to say the least. And I set off looking for a spiritual teacher. And Krishna was very kind. Within a couple of weeks, I met devotees in London. And Dr. Fred, who's now Vimukta Sangha, saw me in there in Piccadilly Gardens in the middle of Manchester and said, "Oh, do you want to come and take lunch with us?" And that was my first taste of prasadam. And that was due to the mercy of Ramchandra Prabhu, who went up to Manchester, a fairly grim place. It was then. I can't say that now. But probably is still grim. And he opened the temple there. And many devotees came from Manchester.
Me and Mahavishnu. And Deva Maya, the three of us.
The three of them, yeah. And that up in Manchester was the first time I saw this album. The first time I had darshan of Sri Radha Londonishvaras. So this is the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and his devotees. Actually, the deity of the Lord is appearing on an album cover, which is appearing in shops all over the world. All over the world. And not only do we have darshan of Sri Radha Londonishvaras, we also have darshan of Srila Prabhupada. And not only that, we open it up and we see, we even have the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu conducting Harinam Sankirtan.
I remember the week that album came out, George paid for the posters on the underground, and at the long escalator going down to these platforms at Holborn, every single little frame, all the way down, had Radha and Krishna. That was our local tube station, so I arranged it specially for us.
So this, of course, you've no doubt either got a copy of this. Is not an original one. This is the 1996 version. It's a reprint, but this one contains Prayers to the Spiritual Master. And for those of you who are There's a picture there of George Harrison with Mukunda in the studio on the original recording. And on the flip side is that amazing temple that Shamsundar put together with the redwood he brought all the way from California redwood, and he stored it somewhere, and he built an amazing temple. For those of you who never went to Berry Place, you never saw, it's like being in an ark, an upturned boat. And it really, because it was an ark, this is where the Lordships and Srila Prabhupada bestowed their mercy and saved every one of us. And continues to save every one of us. There's a whole host of devotees, some of whom I don't know. And when I joined, this purple carpet was also there on the floor. And when I went to the temple, paying my obeisances on that carpet, I thought, ooh, this is a bit old, this carpet.
Yeah, Jagannath above Londonishvaras, like I mentioned.
Yes, there's Jagannath Subhadra Balaram, Shishi Londonishvaras. And within a couple of weeks, the carpet had gone. And I breathed a great sigh of relief, because offering one's obeisances wasn't a very tasteful, very pleasurable thing to do on that carpet. It had been there for 2 or 3 years, with many people coming backwards and forwards. And of course, that later on, that album became manifest as the Goddess of Fortune, which people used to find in charity shops up in the country. A different mood. This is a very different mood. It's very accessible. It's not kind of heavy with devotion. It's a different mood completely. That came out in the 80s, I believe. So this trend of recording on vinyl was started by Srila Prabhupada himself in New York. Within a few months of him opening the temple, he went to a local studio and recorded what is known as the Happening album. And that's the album that the Beatles heard. Many people heard that album all around the world. The Beatles heard it, and because of that, there's a story that they were in they were looking for an island property. They wanted to get away from it all, away from the traumas of stardom. They were looking to buy an island somewhere in Greece, around the Greek islands. And it didn't quite work out. But they spent quite some time on a yacht sailing around the Greek islands, all chanting Hare Krishna together. George used to play his ukulele, and they'd all chant Hare Krishna for hours and hours on end. So, whether it's MP3 players, or whether it's vinyl records, or tapes, or whatever, we are so blessed that we can actually go out and broadcast the holy name. And London is famous, as we know, for chanting Hare Krishna, seeing devotees on the street. We used to go all day, every day, up and down Oxford Street, maybe 6 times, up and down. And of course, so many people have heard their holy names. And I used to love doing Harinam, loved it. But within a short time, I was relegated to the office in Berry Place, which was down in the basement, because I used to do design work, graphic work, mantra cards and Rathyatra posters and all different stuff like that. But I think possibly the height of success was one of my first efforts when I went to show Shamsundar this piece I'd done, advertising a program that Srila Prabhupada was going to appear in. And he looked at it, oh, very nice. He said, go and show it to Srila Prabhupada. Yeah, show it to Prabhupada. So Shamsundar, let's say, he was very generous, isn't the word. He loved to share Srila Prabhupada with as many people as he possibly could. He didn't kind of keep Prabhupada cloistered away. He wanted to share Prabhupada with everybody. And he, of course, he arranged so many programs for so many visits, scholars and journalists and people in the media, different personalities came to see Srila Prabhupada by Shamsundar's arrangement. In fact, when we first got back to Dhananjaya, Srila Prabhupada said, I'll stay here for as long as you bring people for me to preach to. So perhaps that's one of the reasons why Srila Prabhupada stayed for so long at Bhaktivinoda that first summer. Anyway, I knocked on the door. Come in. So there I go in for my obeisances. Prabhupada sitting there with his back to the window, the light, sunshine streaming in. And this is the first time I've ever met Srila Prabhupada. And I just feel like a transparent, like Prabhupada's just seeing right through me, as everybody does. Seeing right through me, totally transparent, with nothing, there's nowhere to hide. So I said, Srila Prabhupada, Shamsundar asked me to show you this. So I passed it to Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada took it, he read it out loud, the whole thing, with 2 hands, and he said, "Thank you very much." And the gratitude in his voice, that was tiny service, as he is to every one of us, for whatever service we do, have done. Prabhupada is so grateful. He sees past our nonsense and our misdemeanors and shortcomings, and he's grateful for whatever service that we have to offer. So that was my first contact with Srila Prabhupada, and I'm very grateful to Srila Prabhupada and to his disciples, those first 6 devotees who came over, who established all this, and to those who came and joined because of them, Dhananjaya Prabhu and Rancho Prabhu, so many. And grateful to you all, actually, that you're continuing to continue Srila Prabhupada's wonderful mission. It's a privilege to be asked to come and speak. Hare Krishna.
Going back to deity worship, what I remember from Yamuna's teaching was cleanliness. We spent a lot of time cleaning, and it was really blissful. And we were told we were cleaning our heart, and also to always be on time, either for the arti and for the offering, the cooking offering. And something I can share with you was something about the cooking for Srila Prabhupada in London in the beginning. And in my own relationship with Srila Prabhupada, I felt that through the cooking, Srila Prabhupada was increasing the loving exchange with the spiritual master and the disciple. So I had heard from God sisters and God brother that Srila Prabhupada said, "I would love to go to the spiritual world just to eat logdu and kachoris." So logdu, it's a wonderful sweet made of chickpea flour, and it is deep fried in ghee in little balls, and there is inside we put dry fruits, dry nuts, and camphor. And the other savory he used to love was kachoris. And when he was a little boy in Calcutta, he used to look at the people in the streets who were selling and making kachoris. And I think it's in Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. They used to like this little boy and give to him kachoris, and he would fill his pockets with kachoris. So I thought, well, it would be wonderful to learn how to make logdu and kachoris for Srila Prabhupada. And there were some guests who were coming, and especially a Bengali lady, and she knew about kachoris. So I asked her, "Can I come to your house and learn how to make kachoris?" And she said, "Yes, of course, come." So I went to her house, and she told me how to make peas kachoris. So I didn't think I would ever have a chance to make them for Srila Prabhupada, but anyway, I learned how to make them. And one time, so we go a little bit further at the manor. There was one devotee, a very good cook called Imavati. She was supposed to cook for Srila Prabhupada, but she couldn't make it. And he stayed about, I believe, for 1 month. And somehow or other, I was told to try to cook for Srila Prabhupada. And I had learned from many people how to do different things. And I started to make different preparations every day with the help of the servant. And I hope I'm not wrong, it might have been Sruti Kirti. And so every day I was bringing, and one day I brought the kachoris. And when I brought them on a plate, Srila Prabhupada's eyes became very big, like little plates. And he says, "Oh, are they kachoris?" And I said, "Yes, I tried, Srila Prabhupada." And then he was very pleased with these kachorries. And so the months went by so quickly because everything was around Srila Prabhupada. So he was going for his morning walks. So we were trying to be part of the walk. After he was giving the class, and then I was cooking, and the days were passing very, very quick, too quick. And at one point, he was going to leave after 1 month. So at this time, I was wondering, so Srila Prabhupada never told me if he really liked the preparations. And I was really wondering. So Prabhupada was going to leave for the airport, and the servant came with a big list, and he says, well, Srila Prabhupada wants you to cook this to bring for the trip. And it was a long list of a lot of things I had made all over the month. So I was really very, very glad, very happy. And I remember he asked for red plum chutney that we make for Srimati Radharani. So we had to run to Radlet, to the shop, and it was closed, but the man was still there, so we knocked, and we told him, well, we need some red plums for our spiritual master. So he opened the shop and he gave them to us. And that was the first time I experienced a very strong feeling of separation. Prabhupada had been so long with us that it seemed almost impossible to leave if he would leave us. So that time I made all the preparation he asked for, and as Chamuna told us when she talked about cooking, he had this 3-tier cooker, brass. So I started polishing it very hard, it was brass, until it was shining like gold. So then I thought, then Srila Prabhupada in the plane will notice, it is shining like gold. And then very selfishly I thought, he will think of me maybe. And that feeling of separation was really blissful. And after one day, it had to come down to resume service as usual. But that was a very, very special time. So, like in that way, the spiritual master was increasing the affection, the spiritual love of his disciple for him through that particular service. So I understood it was really a matter of consciousness, because at another time with these same kachorries, I was not in such a good consciousness. Like Prabhupada was going to come to Paris. I was in Paris, and I wanted so much to see him, but I went against the order of my temple president. And then I went to London anyway. So Prabhupada saw I was there, and he asked for these kachorries. And then I had only frozen peas, and often he says, frozen means rotten. And I made the kachorries, and Srila Prabhupada didn't like them at all. So it's really a matter of consciousness when we cook. And even another time he said, when asked if he wanted me to cook for him at another time, and he said, oh, Mandikini, she didn't do very well last time. So the instruction I got is that it's really a matter of consciousness.
I have a cooking one. Maybe the summer 71 was when I left England and went to France. And as Prabhupada wanted, I stayed in France. We stayed in Govardhan Puj, and then we went to Geneva, and we did open a temple. And then later, before the next summer, Hansadutta closed the temple, as well as a couple of temples in Germany. So when Prabhupada came in the summer of 72, when he came to Paris, but actually I had gone to England first to see Prabhupada in England. And so myself and Jai Hari, Rabatnanda Swami, we were all in the kitchen making preparations for when Prabhupada would arrive. And we were all wondering, who's going to cook for Prabhupada? And so Prabhupada kind of gave a morning class, and then he took prasadam, and then he called up Himavati. Himavati hadn't even come into the kitchen, and he said he wanted Himavati to cook for him. So then I assisted her, and I was amazed at her simplicity in cooking. And if somebody had left something, some half of a green pepper or a potato, she would use it, and she was using it for Prabhupada. There was no waste. Cooked very simply, very clean. It was very inspiring to help her and to see how she was cooking. And Prabhupada was always very pleased. And I think I ended up cooking for the devotees, all 116 or 150, whatever they were. I was exhausted. So one day, first thing Himavati did, the old devotees, they were always giving you a way to meet Prabhupada. So we were in the temple room, and somebody gave a garland to Himavati and said, will you give this to Prabhupada? And Himavati says, oh, well, let's let Aditi do it. And I was kind of foolish. Oh, yes, I'll do it. So first of all, I had to make my way all the way to the front of the temple where Prabhupada's Vyasa sign was, and his eyes were closed, and he was chanting Jai Radha Madhava. And I just couldn't put the garland on him. I couldn't disturb him. And it was going longer and longer, and I didn't know what to do. I'm standing there. So finally I had to put the garland on. I put it as lightly as I could, and he just opened his eyes and looked at me, and I realized I had just pulled him from Vrindavan, from being with Radha and Krishna. And he wasn't angry, but I felt like I'm the fool that rushes in when the angels, they fear to go there. And then later on, during that visit, Himavati said, oh, Prabhupada's having a program outside of London, why don't you come with us? So I jumped into the back of a van, and I don't know where this was or exactly, but I remember that I was sitting kind of it was a classroom, and there were seats lined up, and I was kind of right in front of Prabhupada, who was where you're sitting, more or less. And Himavati was in the line next to me, and I couldn't stay awake. For the life of me, I was so tired. And Prabhupada, he didn't chastise me. I couldn't believe it later when I thought about it. Himavati would elbow me, and I'd jump up and wake up. And Prabhupada, he didn't say a word, I think he knew I was sincerely tired because I'd been working so hard and cooking for the devotees. And there weren't a lot of guests at that program. And so then we went to the home of an Indian family. And Prabhupada was sitting on a couch. And I remember Tribhuvanath was there. I don't know if were you there, Dhananjaya? And we all sat in kind of a semicircle around Prabhupada. And we didn't quite know what was going to happen. And then I think it was Sruti Kirti began cutting fruits for Prabhupada. And about 20 minutes later, there was full plates of prasadam for all of us.
That was Mr. Prajapati's house in Reading.
Okay, Dhananjaya knows everybody's name in every situation I don't know. And what happened was it was getting late, and so Prabhupada said, so we shall sleep here tonight. So no toothbrush, no change of clothes, no sleeping gear. We were just, sleeping in the house with Prabhupada. So I remember the last thing I saw at night was Manu sitting at the feet of Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was preaching to Manu. And then I wandered off to the room that the women were sleeping in up the corridor. And the first thing in the morning, I woke up and didn't have a toothbrush. And I went back down to where Prabhupada's room was, and there was Prabhupada preaching to Manu sitting at his feet. And it was so beautiful. And there were all these calls coming from London, where's Prabhupada, where's Prabhupada? And you were in the temple, Dhananjaya, or were you with us? Do you remember?
I was there.
You were there, okay.
We didn't finish eating till about 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I know, it was so
a huge
incredible.
feast because actually Prabhupada, he was asked by his host, Swamiji, would you like some hot milk? My wife has prepared some hot milk. And Prabhupada said yes. And then he asked, would you like something with the hot milk? And Prabhupada said, maybe some puris, because Prabhupada liked to take puris with hot milk. And he said, if they're ready, if they're hot? And they said, yes, they're freshly made. And so then after the puris came, then Mr. Prajapati said, my wife has cooked some sabjis, would you like some sabji with your puris? And so very, surreptitiously, all these different preparations came. And then all of a sudden there was about 15 or 20 preparations. Then Prabhupada said, "You've tricked me." He said, "Actually, I came to your house to take some milk, and now you're offering me a full feast." And then he asked, he said, "So what about everybody here? Can you also feed everybody here?" And he said, "Oh yes, we've made sufficient." And so we all sat, and we all ate with Srila Prabhupada. But the amazing thing is, I remember, because after eating such a heavy feast, you know how difficult it is to wake up.
Yeah.
But actually, Prabhupada was alert, and he was ready to leave at 4 o'clock. He wanted to go back to see Radha Londonishvaras. And we had to really drag ourselves. I mean, I just remember that it was just such a difficult thing to really concentrate, and now I have to leave, because all you want to do is sleep, because, that's natural. But Prabhupada was just absolutely, completely, fully Krishna conscious and ready to go.
And Prabhupada was.
And then when he has to go, you have to go too. He doesn't wait for anybody. In fact, many times devotees were left, stranded at different places, and they weren't on the ball with Srila Prabhupada. They were just left. Prabhupada just went off. Even on morning walks, he did the same thing. He'd be across the road, and you'll be looking right and left and right, and then Prabhupada's across the street. How did he do that? We're young, and he's old, but still he's streets ahead of us.
On this occasion, and I don't know if it was you that told me this or who it was, but when it was time for Prabhupada to leave, at Mr. Prajapati's house, everyone got into his car, his party, and then somebody said, "Where's Pradyumna?" And nobody knew where Pradyumna was, and Prabhupada said, "He will be in the kitchen." And so they went to the kitchen, and sure enough, there he was, and he came running out, carrying plates of prasadam.
It was very delicious prasadam. I have to say, it was absolutely delicious. I'm sure those wonderful original 6 devotees have mentioned how Radha Londonishvara came. Yeah? Maybe I can tell a little story from my perception, because I was also there at that time in December. And I just remember seeing it for the first time upstairs in Prabhupada's room. Prabhupada had one room, and that one room was his office. It was also his bedroom, and it was also the place where he took prasadam. It was and also his massage, of course, and darshan. It was a multi-purpose room. And we had nothing else, actually, because very places, we just actually went there. I was brought in by Pramara, we happened to go past very place. And so many memories come flooding by because of that. And so Prabhupada had got the devotees to bring those deities up to his room. And then he called us all into his room. And Prabhupada was just smiling victoriously. It was just an amazing thing to experience. And Prabhupada just said, Krishna didn't want to stay there in Forest Gate. He tricked all those men there, especially the pundit. The pundit, of course, refused to, perform the pran pratishna because there was some slight damage, but actually it was hardly noticeable, and that damage was easily repaired. So then Prabhupada decided on the date to install the deities. That was the 14th of December, 1969. And that was also a momentous occasion for me, because that's the day I also got Brahmin initiation from Srila Prabhupada, along with Jai Hari and myself. And Digvijaya. Digvijaya is one of those devotees that Sakshi Gopal can't recognize on the cover of the single. And the other one is Tirthapat. They got initiated by Prabhupada in March by post, by letter of 1969. And Prabhupada was able to multitask. It was just phenomenal that, although he was very much advanced in age, but his consciousness was so acute that he could multitask very, very easily. And all his energy was into everything that he was doing. He became very, very sober when he performed initiation, of course, when he was doing, he also did, of course, the fire ceremony, because we didn't know exactly how to do those things. So Prabhupada did those things himself. And of course, you know the story how the pillars were not exactly fixed properly, the ones that were supporting the shelf that Jagannath Subhadra Baladev was standing on. And Prabhupada wanted a 7-day festival. And he wanted the press to be invited, he wanted politicians to be invited, he wanted all kinds of dignitaries. I remember our solicitors came, Goodman, Derrick and Company. They were one of the most famous. Does that name sound familiar to anybody from the 60s? Goodman, Derrick and Company. They were the top flight solicitors, and they're the ones who organized the memorandum and articles of the society. And I happen to be one of the original signatories of that, as a witness. And there was one very influential MP who also helped us. His name was Tom Dryberg. He was quite an extraordinary character in himself, Tom Dryberg, Labour MP. Because actually he was a spy during the Second World War. He worked for MI5. We didn't know that until later. But he was also very keen to establish our society. And he was also there, he attended in one of the days, and the BBC came along and he took footage of what was going on. Of course, what we didn't realize was that, you know, when that happened, when the pillars started to rock back and forth, and it seemed like the whole altar was going to collapse, you know, the ledge that Jagannath Subhadra Baladev was standing on. And Prabhupada acted very, very efficiently, very quickly, and also exhibited amazing strength for you know, a very slight Bengali gentleman in his 70s. That was also extraordinary. But we didn't know what was going on because we were sitting the other side of the curtains. We just saw devotees rushing in and then coming out with different pillars and other paraphernalia. And the temple was completely jam-packed. Like even, like this is packed, but it's comfortably packed. But in Berry Place, we had about 150, really not very comfortably packed. And we thought this was just all part of the ceremony, because I'd never witnessed an installation of deities before, so we just presumed this was all part of, you know, the arrangements, the festival, the festive arrangements. Things were coming out and things were going in, and so on and so forth. But it was very subdued. It wasn't like there was any hint of panic going on behind the curtains, which is quite extraordinary. And so what Prabhupada instructed, he wanted that every evening that all the guests should be served halava, puris, and cut fruit. Halavas, puri, and fruit salad. So that went on from the 14th of December up until the 21st of December. And also during that time, of course, Jamuna, because that was her incredibly strong desire to worship Radha Krishna. That was something that, I don't know if she mentioned this, but there was one Brijbasi lady called Shamama. And, you know, those of you who've been to Vrindavan, and especially Ramanreti, you might have heard of her name, because she has actually 2 ashrams in Ramanreti. She has one just behind the Krishna Balaram temple, and she has one on the main road, which we call Bhaktivedanta Swami Marg. It's just past the Chitrakut ashram, Shamama ashram. And she became famous because she claimed that in her young years, she was being attacked by Gundas at the side of the Jamuna. and she called out, Radhi, Radhi, and jumped, and she was able to jump all the way across to the other bank of the Jamuna. That's what she claimed. In this way she was saved from being robbed and attacked by those gundas. And so actually she came to London because she wanted to start a temple. She's got one in Leicester, she's got one in South London, she's got one in Nairobi, and some other places too. So she was seeing, aha, here's someone that perhaps I can influence to come over to my camp. So she actually gave a set of Radha Krishna deities to Jamuna. Did Jamuna tell this story? Because, as I mentioned previously, the original, the altar at Tiddenhurst Park, there were the three little sets of Jagannath deities. And so in London, before the work started on the temple room, Jamuna had been given this little set of Radha Krishna deities, and so they were there above the three sets of Jagannath deities, and above the Radha Krishna deities is a big painting of Srila Prabhupada. And I just remember being so fascinated, especially when it came to the time to offer the camphor, because it wasn't just like little sprinkles of camphor on a little wick, a ghee wick, but it was like a big chunk of camphor. And when you set fire to camphor, you know what happens? You get all this black smoke that comes off it, and it becomes like soot, and it falls on everybody present, you know, who's participating in the art. I thought this was part of the purification process. If you got more black soot in you, the more purified or whatever you became. It's really interesting. And so she was really in ecstasy that this is something that she was dreaming of for such a long time, to have Radha Krishna deities. And so she wrote this really enthusiastic letter to Prabhupada. You know, by Radha Krishna's grace, these little deities have come to me, and so on and so forth, and I'm so excited. And Prabhupada wrote back this very stern letter. Immediately, return those deities. She is trying to steal you from me. He said, be patient, be patient. All these things will come to pass. Just be patient. Krishna will fulfill all your desires, but just be patient. And so, of course, being very obedient to Srila Prabhupada's instructions, she immediately returned those deities to Shaloma. And we never heard or saw of her again. Of course, there's a whole other chapter concerning the Krishna Balaram temple, which I don't want to go into now. But so then, of course, here was Yamuna's wonderful opportunity to worship and to dress and to make outfits for these wonderful marble Radha Krishna deities that came free of charge from Forest Gate temple, Hindu temple. And along with that, along with all the instruction that Prabhupada gave to Jamuna, how to dress the deities and what prayers to say and so on, actually Prabhupada had little asanas made. And who was saying about polishing? Duraglit? Aditi. Yeah. Actually, those little asanas that were just made of velvet, I mean, they were very nicely upholstered, but they were tiny. And the reason, you know the reason what Prabhupada said about that? He said that whenever great dignitaries, like Lord Brahma, Lord.Siva, Narad Muni, they want special darshan of Radha Londonishvara, when no one else is around, then they can sit in these little asanas either side of Radha Londonishvara.
Do you know where that originally came from? During one of the big programs in London?
That was in Conway Hall.
It
was in Conway Hall.
Was that the one that was empty?
Yes, yes, that was the one that there's maybe 30 people showed up, and we were all despondent, and Prabhupada said, no, this is very successful. He said, didn't you see? Lord Brahma was dancing in the kirtan, so was Lord Shiva, and Lord Muni was also there, and yeah. So that's why he instructed that these little asanas be made either side of Radha Londonishvara.
Was it one or two?
Two.
It was two.
Either side. One on this side, on the left, and another one on the right.
You only got one.
In case they, you know, maybe two guests, two dignitaries come, No, just the one.
Is this anywhere else, or is this just
No,
here?
no. Actually, Prabhupada didn't. You know, he was very personal. So whenever he gave instructions for specific temples and for specific devotees who were taking on that service as pujaris, and he didn't want it particularly mimicked or copied in other places. So it's not that, you know, because this is happening here that they should do the same thing in Los Angeles, or what's happening in Los Angeles should be done here. No. Prabhupada was very, very personal with that, also with the deities. That's a very important point to understand. So, I was going to say something else. Yeah, actually he wanted the outfits to be made by the pujaris. He didn't want them particularly purchased from India. Just like I think this outfit, this is made. Made in, yeah, made here. Made here. Yeah. Because that's very, very personal, very intimate service that the pujaris are performing for their lordships. Are there any other questions?
Just on that topic of deity worship, and you mentioned theirs, I would be interested to know if Srila Prabhupada implemented the 16 upachars, and besides I'd be interested to know more about the details of deity worship, particularly of the bathing ceremonies. The 2 prayers from Brahma Samhita, the 2 shlokas from Brahma Samhita, and the 16 upachars. Is that something, the 16 items of worship, is that something that Srila Prabhupada implemented? And also just a very quick question. I've noticed that quite a few of the London devotees refer to Jagannath as Jagannath, Subhadra, and Baladev. I've never heard that before, and is it...
That's their names.
Is it local to London?
That's their names. There's 3 personalities.
In that order? I've
Lord
never heard
Jagannath,
that before.
his brother Balaram,
Subhadra and
yeah.
Baladev, in that order. I've never heard that before. I like it.
Very good. The other thing that, now I just remember what I wanted to say, that along with instructing, giving personal instructions to Jamuna about how to sew for the deities and cook for them and how to worship them, Srila Prabhupada also gave singing lessons to Mother Jamuna. How to sing the slokas of Bhagavad Gita. Now, of course, Gita Jayanti is coming up very soon in December. And we were never privy to that. It was only Prabhupada and Jamuna and the harmonium. And we'd hear this amazing sound coming out of Prabhupada's room. You could sit and listen at the door, but, Prabhupada was giving his, all his attention was focused on Jamuna and teaching certain ragas how to sing the slokas of Bhagavad. And he never did that with anybody else, as far as I know. Of course, he sang himself. There are recordings of Prabhupada singing the slokas of Bhagavad Gita. But as far as I know, no other disciple was privy to actually getting private instruction like that from Srila Prabhupada. That's how much he loved and trusted Jamuna. Quite extraordinary.
Regarding your question, I think it would be, my memory is quite faulty, and it would be really good to ask Jamuna, maybe tomorrow, full technical details to make sure to make no mistake.
Okay. Just wanted to take this opportunity, not to interrupt because it's very wonderful what's happening, but just to welcome these 2 Vaishnavas who've joined us here. Mother Urmila is also here. Bhagananda Prabhu is here with us. And Sruti Kirti Prabhu. So I'd like to thank these devotees who spoken thus far. Everyone is welcome to please stay. Sruti Kirti will say a few things, speak now. But please let us both welcome and thank these devotees simultaneously by chanting very loudly 3 Hari Bol. Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Shri Radha Londonishvaras ki jai.